please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like, so our first, we've got a special guest here tonight. This is Emily Russell, and with her landscape design and architecture firm, and we have contracted with her to do some concepting and some 30% designs of 2 pocket parks, one on the piece of property that's located next to the Comfort Inn along a part of our pathway, and the other is an expansion to the Marine Park. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Emily, and remember, these are concepts here tonight, so don't get, too far down in the weeds on this. We're going to probably in the next, if not at a future council meeting for sure, at the next work study, work towards bringing one of these concepts or merging some of the concepts together, and then Emily will get us to where we've got a pretty picture to go shopping down in Olympia or for grants for 2 potentially wonderful waterfront parks. So, Emily.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here. I have a landscape architecture firm in downtown Bremerton, and I've lived in this area my entire life, and I've been coming to Port Orchard waterfront and downtown and the farmers market for as long as I can remember. So I'm really honored to be working on this for you and for the community. So,
do we have this in a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay.
Trying to pull it up.
Somebody gonna drop that screen? Michelle, hint, hint.
Hello? Is it on? Okay. All right.
We're still waiting on the PowerPoint. Michelle, could you catch some of the lights? Thank you. I love technology.
That's a PDF.
Yeah.
That's a PowerPoint.
Let me see.
There we go. Can we remind you later that?
We passed on the upgrade.
It's being goofy, and here's this.
Oh, okay.
Right arrow, I think, goes to the next slide. But I gotta put the chip in real quick.
Okay, there we go. All right, so the kind of magenta colored area is the existing park, of course, along the waterfront there, and you'll see the 2 sites that we're talking about tonight in green, and the dotted line around those would be the limit of work line. So you can see how a portion of the parking lot would be included in the park expansion. And then we have Rockwell Park on the east edge. Okay, these are the site features of this area, and there's really great accessibility already. We have the foot ferry. The colors down at the bottom kind of correspond to what's happening in the map. So some park space, the existing boardwalk, farmers market, waterfront park, playground, and Bay Street in that area. We're zooming in a bit more so you can see better the areas that would be included in the project. So when we think about reasons to drive the design, we need to think about things like spaces that feel safe for potential users, the fact that families are already using the space and there's potential for this to become even more heavily used. The farmers market is there. We want to have a space that's flexible and allows for the farmers market as well as other user groups. There's really great water access right now, some access down to the beach, and as well as viewing Sinclair Inlet and some gathering space already. In the future, the boardwalk will be redesigned, and we need to think about how this project can respond to that and plan for that connection in the future. And then also the Mosquito Fleet Trail that runs through the site as well as part of a greater path system. And really important mosquito fleet history on the site as well, with the Carlisle being part of it. And then important too to have some continuity between both of the project sites so that it's obvious that these two areas are working together and kind of pull together the space in the middle, the existing park. So the first concept is, in fact, inspired by the Mosquito Fleet. As you probably know, the Carlisle, which uses the ferry dock adjacent to the site, is one of the only two operating Mosquito Fleet vessels left on the Sound, the other being the Virginia 5, but this boat actually works as a ferry, which is very special. There's no other boat like this anywhere. And then also, with the same name, of course, the trail system, and you can see our site in the box on the map. And so the ways that the Mosquito Fleet could influence one of the two concepts would be, some forms inspired by the Mosquito Fleet era wave shapes, shoreline-inspired planting, and interpretive signage. I think it's important to educate the public about this unique history on this site, and we could do that through signage and other materials on site. More inspiration of some wave forms, boardwalks, some subtle boat inspiration in the seating there. And then that brings us to the first of the two plans. In this case, it's pretty soft sort of look. You can tell by the inspiration images at the bottom there too. It's kind of the feel that we're going for. But if you can imagine in the Is it a laser? Yeah, there you go. Yep, there we go. These wave shapes here would be sort of some terraced seating like this. And so we have this sort of both challenge and opportunity of wanting to have this area be part of what's happening with the farmers market set up here, being able to look out at the view and respond to the performance space that's immediately next to it. That's, of course, the existing picnic shelter and performance space. Restrooms are here. So cutting into the parking lot a bit, and this would be, maybe grasscrete, something like this, that's a pervious surface, but that's also a flexible space to allow for the setup of the farmer's market and parking if you need to. but could transform into a lot of other uses. So it doesn't have to just be lawn, although it could be in that area. You could treat it like a beach on its own by filling these cells with anything you like, sand, clumps of grasses. That could be its own really interesting feature too. But then you can sit up on these terraced, probably lawn-filled terraces and seat walls, and so you can get up kind of high and look out, or you can be down low and protected from the wind. It's a lot of seating area and picnic space for families. That accommodates a lot of people and still somehow feels private, I think, too, because of all these different directions that you can face. And then we're incorporating the viewing of bikers and walkers on the trail system as well. The Mosquito Fleet Trail runs through this area. And then something very similar in the way that it feels on the Rockwell site. We have terraced viewing areas as well that are oriented toward Sinclair Inlet. And in order to so we have Bay Street here. There's quite a bit of traffic, so we need to have a way to really make people want to stop and hang out in the space without feeling too exposed. So if we cut in a bit and do a seat wall in this area, have this area all be very open feeling, and then the canopy of trees, you'll get enough of a separation from the street without feeling unsafe or blocked from view.
One challenge we've already recognized there is we've got some, because we have a multimodal pathway that as designed there, right, won't work for our radius requirements. So it'll have to be softened quite a bit there, that left turn towards the water. But
Yeah,
that
that
was
can be
a-
changed.
this is a concept.
Right, that was a miscommunication between Emily and I. The pathway's in an easement, but I think the simple solution is that seat wall where you have it. It's just gonna shift,
Yeah.
over a little bit and be adjacent to and parallel to the pathway. So the concept is fine as a concept.
Yeah,
It just has
that's
to move a little bit east.
easy enough. Yeah. So this parking is down a little lower. We have access right here for ADA as well as launching small boats from that parking area. And so you can easily get down and around to the beach, and it would be great if it's possible to do this grasscrete here as well and have that be an ADA accessible beach, at least for a small portion of it. The grade works really well there for that. And then, of course, we're wrapping around to continue the trail off to the east there. Okay. The second concept is inspired by the fact that the site between our two sites it's a playground. You know, this is an area heavily used by families, and also there's a performance space on that site that could probably be used even more than it is. So there's the potential there to provide this idea of play for people of all ages, user groups, and abilities. And this shows, some inspiration from other projects where you have these kind of, one button there, enlarged stones, easel trampolines, public art that can double as musical instruments. And then we have some, ping pong and different things happening on that one. More inspiration for that.
Those swings on the right, and that's one of the features I really like.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's kind of some suspended nets, kind of an obstacle course, sort of public art opportunity, fountains, and then, yes, you might be seeing something similar to this in 1 second. Okay, so still a nautical feel to this one. I think it's appropriate on the site to do something like that in either concept. This one works very similarly, that you can, have really great views through the site in all of these different directions. So this is where, let's see, oh yeah, it's very small, but here's the swings again with the arbor, place to sit and view the bay and people watch, people coming by on the path there. And then seat walls in this wave shape that, as you can tell, provide lots of little places to have more intimate gathering spaces, and then space for larger groups as well. So lots of picnic space for the farmers market and viewing during the times when it's not happening. And then I imagine this as a public art piece that obviously is shaped like a boat, but could be very open and almost like a skeleton of a ship, possibly something open that you could see through, and provide seating as well when you're when it's part of that performance space. This net feature could happen along the top. There could be climbing wall on one side of it, and a space for kind of drawing public art on the other side of it. So there are a lot of different ways that you can use that form. And then also something like this possibly for the performance space. Either musical public art or small stages for buskers, since you do have this covered seating as well existing right here. And then on the Rockwell Park side, some similar idea, seating facing outward, and it might be kind of fun to have a dock become a segment of the Mosquito Fleet Trail right there. And I was thinking of this idea of walk the plank. So you come out to the end here if you don't continue along, and you can actually slide down to the beach. And then some remnants of pilings that would be shown, as public art. So it could either be something like this that's musical or something more decorative. And then again, all of this section would be ADA accessible, flush with the paving, so that someone could park here and take a boat or wheelchair or stroller directly through onto the beach, and could give them access, but again with the that grass paved kind of material. And that's it. Questions? Back on one of these.
So I'll put these out in the hallway. I mean, we've got a couple of boards here that have those, if you can turn the lights back on, Michelle, we've got a couple of boards here. And so we've got two themes here. One is more the wavy, less formal. And then we've got the other one that's, got more of a playground feel to it. Personally, I really like the swing concept, and,
It's because you're
if I had maybe I
you're
was
a big swinger.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, would it be too weird to have the swing concept, Emily, in this?
Yes.
Would the swing concept work with this drawing over here too? Do you think it could too?
Yeah.
So there's things I like about both, but I don't know how far we want to get. We're 20 minutes into it. I don't think we probably want to spend more than about 10 minutes tonight, and maybe we want to bring it back, but maybe all of you are going to go, wow, I love A or B. And so, Brett, you start with
I
you.
just had two quick questions. One is that I like both concepts. I think I like the play one a little better because it's more interactive. I was wondering if there could be a water feature. I don't know what that would be, but maybe a fountain or someplace where people could walk into water. Maybe on the waterfront one, I guess the left one as I call it. And I had a thought as you're talking about the Rockwell parcel, which is that it seems like we're assuming the parking should be on the left side, which is going down a driveway to park.
It needs to be,
It can't be on the right side?
because of the road, we're going to use, that's our easement. It's
we'd have to get an additional easement from.
From Comfort Inn. Well, and the reason I brought that up is if you had parking on the right side, it would be the same level as the Comfort Inn entrance, which is the wider entrance than
Right.
the Marley entrance. So it's just.
We have a Rockwell Street end, and
Yeah, but it goes down and it's not
yeah.
visible from the street and people like to see it from the street.
That is our easement.
The other, I mean, I'm saying we couldn't negotiate and purchase an easement to get to those parking spaces, but the other issue is the Rockwell Park was conceptualized to some degree as having more waterfront access for kayaks and things. So by being through that one, you're actually down lower,
Yeah.
closer to the water.
I guess my only concern too with the water feature is exactly what we're contemplating out at the McCormick Village Park is cost and long-term maintenance to something of that nature. I mean, it's a great idea, it's just
You got
how much.
a water feature lapping at the shores.
Yeah. Emily, on the waterfront park, where we're displacing the parking, is in both of these concepts, am I seeing that that's an elevated, we're mounding that or berming it? Is that what that is?
Yes. Yeah, it's a terrace,
Terrace.
bit of a terrace, so it would be seat wall that's backfilled. So yeah, it's kind of in a berm sense.
Yeah, when we're currently talking about
It's a
this,
little bit
this
elevated,
is
it's not
terrace.
enough to completely block.
So this is creating.
What's the height, would you say?
I would say, so,
This is stepping up to a seating area looking at the stage, and then on this side, we're stepped up and it's looking back towards where the farmer's market would be. And then you've got an additional, what are we talking, a couple
yeah,
feet
so
each
seat
terrace?
wall height would be 18 inches, probably the same as these chairs. And so the second level, I think, should also be somewhat close to seat wall height, so. you know,
3, 4,
really-
5 foot
yeah,
berm.
it's not-
You seen the park and the waterfront in Kirkland on Moss Bay? Where they have the octagon, where they have music events.
Okay,
That has a nice grassy berm, very simple, and it's worked great for 20 years. So I would like to see rather than a formal stair stepped.
okay.
I like your swing idea.
And I think what she's trying to create here is this wave and nautical feel, and I know we'll get that with a berm. You know, that's how we're getting these lines and, you know. Other, Mr. Diener?
So I like the waterfront play concept. I like that it marries sort of those facilities, but they're not dedicated to the younger kids. So you've got an older set of
So
play
you
opportunities.
like Fred or leaning towards
Yeah,
this
yeah,
concept
I
more
do.
than this concept?
Except for the Rockwell, where I like the mosquito fleet approach to that.
You
And
like this better for Rockwell
Yeah,
and this better for.
yeah. And the Mosquito Fleet beach there is a tremendous beach, and I'd hate to see it influenced by virtue of a slide or anything like that. But and I like the idea that there's a ramp for kayaking and all that. So I like the more simplistic approach to the Rockwell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would second that exactly my thoughts.
Simpler.
I mean, well, some of the argument here too, we've got interactive playground somewhat here, maybe we're, you know,
Duplicating.
expanding upon it, you know. I think we though do need to be respectful. The nice thing about this, I think, over what we have over here is this is creating a better or bigger area for our farmer's market. And what I envision with this brickwork and is the hardscape area that's durable enough that the farmer's market can be there. And you can have still have parking over here.
I may have misunderstood you, Scott.
Scott was saying that he liked this concept for the marina
And
part.
that's what you said.
And then he preferred this concept for
Yep.
more passive.
Yes.
Others?
One thing I think down there right now is that it seems too congested. And with the playground and everything, there's too much stuff. And as we are adding on, I think we have to be mindful not to pack too much in. And so that's my concern about having too many play structures and such. The simplicity, I actually think you get better use of the park if you do keep it more simple. And as we're talking about this concept, it's better for community events, you know, the concerts by the bay and all of that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That thing rocks. you
Yeah.
know?
It does. And I love the swing
And the
concept.
swings
They
are
know.
gorgeous.
This space for the farmer's market, whatever that may be, and incorporating potentially the swings, I think we're just,
They're really neat.
Mark's going, oh my God, I've got to maintain swings now?
And I just see a big
LED
linear
40.
liability.
Come on.
There'll be
John,
slow
come
motions.
on.
Slow motions.
We got about 3 or 4 more minutes here, I just want to hear from John, what are your,
I prefer the mosquito fleet concepts on both. I like the idea of the waterfront park accommodating some of the activities that are currently taking place at the farmer's market, the concert on the bay. It kind of enhances that and plays on what we already have for way down there. And I also like more of the softer treatments that Rockwell provides with the mosquito fleet concept. So I prefer the mosquito fleet, both locations.
Cindy, Sean?
Yeah, I basically echoed what Scott had said. I liked more of the interactive at the waterfront and more of the passive.
So it sounds like we're somewhat split over here, but sounds like everybody likes
I
it.
could go with the mayor's swings on the water.
The swings and the fountain.
The city wants
Something
a fountain.
interactive. It doesn't have to be all of those components, but
No.
just, people are looking for things to do.
Less plastic though.
Yeah.
Less plastic.
I kind of agree with Cindy, there's an awful lot of stuff to do down there now, and it's more of,
It's clutter.
I'm amazed every time I go down to the waterfront in front of the marina, which is just a strip of grass, how many people go down there and take advantage of that. It's incredible.
I think we
It's
can,
just a piece of grass with a couple picnic tables.
we can thank Pokemon for that. I think.
Well,
I'm
actually,
serious. I
even
think
before that,
a lot of people discovered our waterfront through that game.
Oh, I agree,
Yeah.
but before that, there were just always,
Yeah.
during summer months, there's
Yeah.
people down there with a little strip of grass.
Yes.
With them, I like the simplistic, streamlined, smooth approach, less detail.
We got a pretty busy council meeting next week. Is it gonna greatly impact you for us to basically, you take some of these ideas? I know one thing we have to, as we spoke to, this probably has to get shrunk and slid a little bit. And so this one I think is we're pretty close on, that needs to be tweaked to meet our requirements of our pathway. So Emily's got a little bit of work to do here for maybe to update this concept. Maybe between now and our next work study a month from now, Emily could, is it within the scope of what we're doing to tweak this concept a little bit here? Maybe throw some
Swings.
swings in it and some sort of a public art component here, whether it's I fear for the maintenance cost of a fountain.
Maybe the nets are cheaper.
The nets.
I like the nets too.
Yeah,
Yes, I do think.
so we'll let Emily do a little more, refine this a little bit more before we go to our 30% design. Is that workable in the scope of what we contracted to do with you?
Yes.
You can
that's
tell me,
fine.
no?
Yeah, so take the mosquito fleet,
Take this mosquito suite version, we know we've gotta move that pathway there. On this one, what I'm kind of hearing, it's a mixed bag here.
It's a hybrid.
Some folks like the interactive. My concern is
Passively interactive.
passively interactive
all the swings.
is
Alternative
we've got a very vibrant farmer's
That's
market.
politically correct.
And I don't want to displace the farmer's market. We need to create, my concern is we get too busy down here and there's no place for our farmer's market to set up. And we've got car shows and all kinds of other things, and if we get too busy with too many more kids' toys, and we got a really good children's park there already.
Swings and terracing. I
So
think.
swings
Swings and terracing, I think will,
and maybe a public art component.
Yeah,
if you could
I-
pepper it
yeah.
with something from the concept two, just a slight peppering, keep it
Have this
like
without
mosquito
the
fleet, I think we'll do fine.
The fountain. That
This
fountain.
without the fountain part, but it's so cool.
My experience is, even if you have the mosquito free one, simplistic with the terraced and things, kids will play on it. They will find a way to play on that. And if we do decide to put some public art in there, perhaps it could be interactive, you know?
There we go. Good compromise. I'm gonna quickly take these in the hallway for the public to look at.
That's for the kids. Think of the kids.
Do you know the rats are down there?
Yeah. A little leash on them. It's the kids. Everybody's happy.
There's so many, you see them all the time, yeah.
Okay, we are on to our next item on the agenda, which is discussion of updates to the fire code. And I'm going to hand Mr. Wiggins the microphone. Chair there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, my name is Brad Wiggins, I'm the Deputy Fire Marshal of South Kitsap, which represents,
Just a little closer there.
it's
Not on, maybe not.
Let's try it on.
Oh, there we go.
So anyway, so every 3 years or so, we take and update the fire code when the new IFC code comes out. And so me and Mr. Bond have been working on these together along with the other people within my jurisdiction helping me out with this. So we've made just couple little changes. And with that being said, me and Mr. Bond both have reviewed over and over and over, and we caught another error tonight. Beforehand. So the one I want to talk about, the error that we need to rectify a little bit is, where it says that we want to reduce the fire code for type B and type, double check what it is, type F occupancies from 10,000 to 5,000. I'm not sure how many of you were around last time this was adopted, but it got adopted as that, and then there was discussion and it was rechanged. When we printed it off, there were some documents that hadn't been changed yet that I was unaware of when I came into this position last August. So with that, I'm recommending that we do not change down to 5,000, that we leave currently as is. I think it causes all a lot of heartache that we don't need to have at this point. We have a lot of good building going on. We don't need to have this going on. So I'm recommending that we leave it as is, the 10,000, and no change to those. Now within that, the IFC does have, you can make it bigger, but the 10,000 comes into play throughout the county, except for the city of Brampton, which has reduction of that. That's basically brought that number on, what the fire districts feel that a size of building they can have that's non-sprinkled that they can handle with their manpower that they have to put out a fire. So that's where that comes into play.
Brett, how many modern buildings have we seen have a fire?
Modern buildings?
Yeah, in the county overall. I can recall one in Silverdale where Big Five used to be.
Yeah, that was, I guess that'd be modern era that way. I was actually an investigator on that one as well. So, not many. We have a lot of little small fires, waste baskets or electrical, over-circuiting and stuff, but that comes along with the inspection programs that have been going out throughout the county. The more
And so how
violations we
often,
find.
even a waste, let's say it's a waste can or a small electrical fire, how often are those sprinkler systems activated?
Oh, the sprinkler system in those buildings?
Let's
I would
say you had a waste.
I would say in my 30-year career that I've had, I'd probably large buildings that had it probably a half a dozen. The fire doesn't.
30 years?
Yeah, that the fire stays down because those buildings are generally more built safe and they don't have the combustibles and stuff put out where it needs to be happening. But it's the occupancy load. Commercial buildings, the sprinklers are there to put the fire out because of the size of the building and stuff, because it gets out of control very quickly. Residential is just the opposite. It's not really per se to put the fire out, it's to get the people out, and we can rebuild a house, but we can't rebuild a person. So that's where that stuff goes.
So where does International Fire Code is driving a lot of this? Where on these levels that erroneously had the lower level on, what does the International Fire Code drive? What is its recommendation?
Depends on which one it is. It's a lot. I think one of them can have up to almost a 30,000 square foot building. 36.
For Class B, non-sprinklered, it can be up to 9,000 square feet. And for Class F, there's an F1 and there's an F2. F1 is 8,500, which is the smaller of the two.
Right.
Is the biggest thing.
So they're similar to the 10,000.
Yeah. So we're a little bit above what that is compared to some of it, but we're also lower in the other section. So that was the, I guess, the happy medium that before my time as being on the fire marshal's office is where the county jurisdictions got together, said 10,000 is basically the threshold with the manpower that we have for everybody to do that. I mean, if you guys remember the Myries fire, I was on down then that one too. So fairly large building.
Wasn't a modern building.
Was not a modern building, but the manpower it took to put a fire out that didn't have a sprinkler system was tremendous. We had everybody from almost Silverdale all the way down Bangor, all the way up that way, almost to Paulsbo, coming down to help us out with that. So
My last question, then I'll defer to the council. How much outreach have you done to stakeholders on these proposed changes?
on the 10,000
No.
or the
on
whole thing.
This whole thing, how much outreach has been done?
So a lot. So they're the big. I guess the only addition change, and you guys already acted upon it, was the sky lanterns, being let off. We just neglected to put that in that it's going to be unable to sell them. You can't light them off, but unable to sell them as well. It doesn't do no good to say you can sell them and can't light them off. We're just not doing well. And the second part is I reached out to a lot of what we call our service providers that do alarm installs and maintenance, and the fire sprinkler people. Within the code, it doesn't specifically spell out that they can release the documents that tell us what's wrong with the system when they checked it. That's between the business owner and them. We have to follow up with the business owner, and it's hard to do. They didn't have a specific document, but if it's within the code, they can release the information to the fire district to be able to enforce and help them out to get compliance and make sure that maintenance is being done on all the systems. With that, I have a system in place that we use for inspections. It's called IROL. So IROL is inspection reporting online that we report all of our stuff to for the inspections for the businesses, and they would just tag along on with that they could take and download that information and get up with the times with us instead of doing the snail mail all the time. So
Based on my experience, when I managed a business here in town, the fire district came by once a year, and I had to have a certified company come and inspect my system, and there was a tag there that you guys verified.
Correct.
Why do we need something different than that for what you're proposing here, where the company is required to
give it to us.
to tell you that there's a problem?
So-
If you're coming around once a year to
So-
certify that system's
So
been-
the thing is, so there are some systems that's only once a year. Hood systems is our number one cause of fires. That was the cause of Myries fire as well. Those are every 6 months. We don't get to them every year. We get to them every 6 months now, and what we do now. So with that, if you inspect your business in January, well, you don't always come back and hit it in January. It might be November the following year. So you're really a lot farther apart. And the thing is to follow up with the business owners that there are a few out there that they say they need to fix this, fix X, and they don't. There's no way for the sprinkler company to let us know, hey, this is out of service, and that. We can force the hand, but it just makes it cleaner. And this was brought forward mainly by Foxfire was one that approached me on it, that they needed something in the code to allow them to release the information easier to us.
Wouldn't those businesses that are that neglectful just not have it inspected to begin with?
No, because they
There'd be
get,
nothing to report if they chose to not have their, for example, hoods inspected.
the thing is we get out there and get that, and we just have, this is just documentation. I mean, it just goes to the documentation to be able to enforce that to be done. If they're not, it goes to litigations kind of stuff, and so it's just another realm of, that's why the fire code's there, to enforce the, no parking in the fire lane. Yeah, people are gonna park there regardless, but if you don't have nothing written saying you can't, it's not gonna happen for us.
So I had a question about Appendix D. And so, two questions actually. Looks like the fire access gate criteria has been removed.
That's correct, because it's now covered under the IFC. It's already put in there. We no longer have to have additional, more stringent.
That's what I was looking for. And then right above where those strikeouts are, there's a discussion about grades. And then typically 12% is a grade you wouldn't exceed, but if there's an approved automatic fire sprinkler system, you can go to 15%. then it also allows that you can go in excess of 15%, and I'm just curious about in what circumstance we would allow the greater than 15%.
That needs to be, so the greater than 15%, one, is gonna be sprinkler. Two, it's gotta be, you know, a rare occasion. I don't know of any that we've allowed that with. And that's gotta be a decision from the chief and the mayor that they'd say, yeah, we'll allow that to happen.
It's not coming from the mayor, it's coming from the city engineer.
Right, and there's gonna be a lot of that, because realistically, we're not getting a fire truck up there.
Right, so, or an ambulance. So,
Right,
you know,
most
my
likely.
thought is, should we even allow that as an option? And it's apparently not one we've exercised anyways.
Yeah, the 12%, in the IFC, it reads the 12% grade and can be expanded by the local HG if deemed necessary.
Right.
I mean, so that's why that's like, and I don't know the history of how the 15% got to there.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've only been about a little over a year now in this office. And so I was more inclined not to make a lot of changes until I had a little more history on why things were.
I guess that,
On Klein, Mark?
Pardon?
What's the percentage on Klein?
Klein, 20 plus.
Yeah.
What's Sydney?
Sydney between Kitsap and Bay, 15 to 20. 12's been standard.
Yeah, 12's a standard. That's in the National Fire Code, you know, to have, and so.
For new roads.
For new roads. I don't think we're making any more roads that way at all. In fact, a lot of people are going a lot less because they know that triggers automatically. You have to sprinkle everything no matter what the building is. You want to build a shed, it triggers it. So it's like, it's not realistic to do something like that.
well, I guess in the end, if an applicant compelled that it makes sense to be greater than 15%, and the fire chief and the city agree, then so be it.
The engineer puts his stamp on it, not the mayor.
I would not be inclined to tell my fire chief that would be a good idea. You have to, I don't know an example that would be a good idea to have something on a 15% grade that's going to be a structure you're going to occupy.
There's other consequences other than just fire.
Correct. I mean, there's fallout, earthquake standards, all kinds of things that happen with that.
There's just
Erosion.
there's just liabilities that are ancillary to that conversation.
So,
Sounds like an option, but doesn't sound like it's something that
I don't think we'll use it.
ever.
we use.
Yeah.
But we do have a deviation process.
Right, okay.
Any other?
The question that I had on, I'm trying to understand this appeal process that's involved in this, and it refers to the Building Code Board of Appeals. Who is that? What is that?
It's a board I point people to.
Yeah.
And
So.
so if you, yeah, go ahead.
So we had Appendix A in there, which is it tells us what the board, how to appeal stuff. And so we made it more restrictive to allow the local to say who their Board of Appeals is, to allow them to put persons that they deemed are good
Got
quality.
An architect, someone in fire.
Engineer.
It's got an engineer, it's 5 or 6
And then
people.
a builder, I think.
Builder, so it's got all the principals in it, and they're appointed by the mayor. I appointed a couple when I first took office to that board.
So the Fire Safety Advisory Committee is no more?
Are you talking the fire sprinkler one?
The fire safety existing buildings,
Yeah.
fire sprinklers were deleted, but
I think that,
202650 references a fire safety advisory committee, but then when you go back to that text, it's all been lined out, so.
so the history on this chapter, I think in 1997 or late 90s, there had been some sort of fire in an existing building that didn't meet code. And I think they convened a fire safety committee to meet to develop regulations that included fire sprinkler requirements as well as other existing building safety requirements. Now the fire codes and the building codes have mostly caught up with what we wrote at that time, and so a lot of this has been struck from our code because it's already in the IFC and the IBC. And that committee, as far as we know, does not exist anymore. And so we do have a building board of appeals. We felt that would be a more appropriate body to hear appeals. But even the building board of appeals, as far as I know, has never met because we've never had an appeal filed to
It's
them.
gotten close a couple times, but we've been working So once again, I mean, this is the fire district coming to us here in this process. This is the first step in a, you know, gonna be what, a public process. I wanna come back to how much outreach have we done to stakeholders? Doesn't sound. I'm
Not a whole lot. The builders is who I outreach to, and they, you know, I listen to if they have problems with that. They don't, not a whole lot say anything about it, because it's more driven. I mean, the Home Builders Association is the main player that tells us what they like and what they don't like, and it goes bigger than just local. It goes national on what the building codes go with.
We have Teresa Osinski, the executive director here. Would it be beneficial to your group and potentially the realtors to have a stakeholder meeting about these proposed changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a good idea. Again, Director Osinski, the Executive Vice President of the Consent Building Association. I think it's always a good idea to have stakeholder meetings on technical matters. So we would love an opportunity to chat with the fire folks about this in the city, and make sure that as you consider these changes that you're thinking about, obviously, the safety of the citizens and those that are using commercial buildings as well as residential, but also be keeping in mind some of your other struggles, which is the affordability of housing, the inability to lease space in the city, businesses that struggle to be able to pay their rent and be able to build a business and provide for their families. You know, safety is important, no question about that, but we're getting to the point in this code process nationally where we're doing a lot of would-be nices and not necessarily what's really necessary. So we would love an opportunity to talk about this. As you know, we've loved talking about it in the past, so we would like an opportunity to do that again. So thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
So I have an ad hoc committee that I've taxed pretty heavily already, and I hate to keep leaning on those same folks. So if we were going to do a committee, would the builders recommend a person or two to come forward? If we could, okay. So, yeah.
I think maybe it might be easier instead of, you know, getting extra people involved and do it unless the city would like to have it. But I could go to meet with them.
You want to do that directly?
I could do that directly with him. I could bring, you know, some other people that could help me be more up to date on how the code got there. I guess the question, are we looking at looking at all the codes, or just the changes that were proposed, which is just
I think where we're at right now is you've made some recommendations to the city, and a lot of it is striking it and cleaning it up. I think the one that everybody got their eyebrows up about, we've already addressed here. Is
Yeah,
the square
I got that as well.
The square footage issue, which we've put to bed, but I think we need to sit down one-on-one, you know, potentially, and whether it's, you know, Teresa or someone from her, you know,
So I
from
can
her
touch
industry.
base with her, and we could go meet over there. It's fine.
Yeah, we'd love to have Mr. Wiggins, and let me just say, for the benefit of all of you, the Consent Building Association, in concert with the Consent County Association of Realtors, has this year formed an ad hoc committee on the affordability of housing. So we will be working in concert to try to get a better handle on a variety of things that are happening in jurisdictional governments throughout Consent County that are really eroding the ability of families in our communities countywide to be able to afford to live in homes that they are safe in, can afford to be in, and are in the communities and parts of our communities that they wish to have their children grow up in. So I would imagine this might be a great topic that we could bring our friends from the Kitsap County Association of Realtors in on as well. You could kill two birds with one stone, and we could just run through this quickly and see if there's any concerns or any ways we might be able to amend language that you're proposing.
So I mean, it's not a big document. I think we've got 6 or 8 pages total here. And maybe that's the next stop, is we have, you know, a meeting with the Minds, and then bring it back to the council with any, if there's any language changes to another work study. Next month's realistic that, a month from now,
Yeah.
we'd have that piece of it done, and then the council can direct it to go to one of their committees or directly to the planning commission from there for the.
This, just talking about the relationship of this chapter with our Unified Development Code, we're trying to adopt all of this at the same time, but building code updates typically don't go to the planning commission, so I think that
Okay.
April work study would be a good place for this, and we can, I can work with Brad to help the district clean up the language here, and then get it out to the stakeholders, and then if, at the next home builders meeting, I think we can see about getting on the agenda for that.
The question I heard that I wasn't sure that got answered, we're only talking about the proposed changes, not the entire fire code.
This is fire code, but it is.
It's not the entire
Code.
code, it's only what is being proposed.
Yeah,
to be
I think-
changed, and that's what we're.
Correct. So I'm clear as well. So I think we're talking about the whole document, the city document of the fire code, not the IFC, has been already adopted by the city. But everything that's on the fire prevention code is what they would like to review, the whole section, not just the proposed. The changes, not just the proposed changes, but the whole document.
As long as we're all on the same page.
Is that correct, Teresa?
Is everybody good with that direction? So we'll meet the stakeholders, bring it back, and we'll talk next month about this one again. So Brandy, we're gonna add that to the work study for April. Okay, thank you for coming.
It's off again.
Okay, we are on procurement policy. I know we've been waiting all night for that. We sent out, probably, was it last work study? Maybe two?
I think it was 2 work study sessions
Probably-
ago,
We-
possibly.
We're darn close on this. I think our goal is the first meeting in April to adopt these no procurement policies. From what you saw last time, you've got a red line version where we're making proposed changes to it. And Brandy, our assistant treasurer, Rebecca Nichols, and Cindy
Palmer.
Cindy Palmer from Public Works have been the working group that have done the lion's share of this. Remember, in December, at the state auditor's recommendation, we passed a 90-day resolution that we were going to, our policies are much more restrictive than state law, and the auditor's recommendation was, probably shouldn't be. So we're working through cleaning that up. We said we would get this done in 90 days. We're gonna be a week past that, but we felt it was more important to get it right versus rush it to the last meeting in March and not have it quite right. So you saw this document before, and what you're seeing tonight is a red line version of that working group's recommendations. Anything to add, Brad?
Just that we did notify the auditor to let them know that we are going to meet the 90 days of having a procurement policy, and we need additional time to bring it to council for adoption, which would be the April 11th meeting. There's some training and vacations involved this week that has prolonged that additional week. And so we will get this finalized the early next week and off to the auditor and legal counsel for review for a final version, again, April's council meeting, the first one. So you'll see some red line versions, and keep in mind that this was a draft policy that was just purely copied and pasted from a different jurisdiction that was probably a different classification than us. And because we are a second-class city, there's some limitations to what our limits are. And so I had to strike out the other jurisdictions and put our second-class code city requirements in here, which is, I believe, mostly the restriction is with the public works work and the general purchasing. The rest of it is pretty much standard, depending on which type of jurisdiction you are. It's pretty standard. The goal of this is to mirror what the state has, and so that's what this is. And if you're doing an apples to apples comparison of what was presented to you at the last, this last time to now, there was a lot of rearranging of the document, so I didn't strike out any rearranging just because I figured it would create more confusion. So if it's being rearranged and no language has been changed, it's not redlined. It was just simply moved to make it flow a little bit easier. So what is missing out of this document that you will see will be all red line is the federal piece. So there is a section when you do general purchasing, when you have public works projects, and when you have A&E projects, if it's federally funded, there's a different process. And so that's what I need to add in here is the federal process, which will unfortunately add a few more pages to this document. And then we have Cindy from Public Works just fine-tuning the actual publication and the process of when jobs go out for bid and what the process is to review them. So we're just making sure that that's currently what our city does. And then we have Rebecca with the finance department just confirming that all of the RCWs from a financial standpoint make sense. So the bulk of the work's done. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
It's exciting stuff for some of us. But one of the things that I learned in this process is the term called piggybacking, which is
Saw that.
thorn in my side related to our office building we're trying to rehab across the street, that I intended for our very skilled public works staff to do some of the work, and because of the dollar amounts of the work, we can't do any of the work because it's called piggybacking. So that's in a state law. So it is what it is. We can't violate state law. So all of that work will be done by contractors. None of us are. Yes, it would be unfortunate. Yes.
Well, Brandy, how much of this are you gonna have to reduce if we become a code city?
Splitting, not piggybacking, it's splitting. It's called splitting. Bid
I
splitting.
heard you refer to as
Not-
Class city, and some of these were changed because of that.
Wouldn't have to change it. You could.
Little bit of work, but not much, and it's just related to the public works section. So maybe a week's worth of work between everybody. You know, get us from the time that we go to a code city, give us a couple weeks, and it'll be on the next to the second council meeting for approval.
Yeah, my term was splitting. And so when you've got a single trade, we can only do $40,000 worth of work, and we have more than one trade, plumbing, electrical, so on and so forth. We can only do $65,000 worth. Well, we know that project is more than $100,000. So once we broke the $65,000 threshold, we can't, we're splitting, it's considered splitting, and we can't do any of the work. It all has to be performed
So
by
it's the
private sector.
total, not
Yes.
the individual elements.
Correct. It's, you know, labor unions have convinced the state. And the tough part is in an environment where there isn't enough work, it's about them protecting their union jobs. We have a scenario where we can't get anybody to bid, and we still have to go through this.
There's no
We have to.
workaround?
Can't
There's
go in
no,
and paint the walls.
we can't go in and paint our own walls.
We could go in and volunteer.
Yes,
Yes.
we could.
I'm not gonna have an audit finding.
Not the staff, we.
Oh, you, okay.
Volunteers.
Well, maybe you can do some landscaping.
You got a mouse in your pocket? Who's we?
Well, good point. I guess we in the singular board. Me?
I'll join you, John. I'll be
Okay,
handy
now
with a
we-
roller.
there we
I'll
go.
do it.
I guess what I take this as intended for you to read this document here in its entirety tonight. If you've got 10,000-foot level questions, like Fireman Brandy or even on Brandy, she's really the contact point on this.
Well, I appreciate Brandy working with the auditor's office that we've met with, just to get their feedback and make sure ultimately they're
They are.
the bird dogs on this, so they're involved with the blessing of these athletes. It's
A lot of
a
detail.
good
work.
thing for all of us.
Oh, yeah, we really
it around all three departments, the Public Works, the Finance Department, and the Clerk's Office, just to really make sure we don't want to miss anything and we want to get it right.
Randy, you had mentioned would it be complying with federal rules as well?
Correct.
We're adding a section.
Pardon me?
There's a additional section.
Separate section for federal.
Maybe some of the terminology in here that's blessed by the state is not blessed by the Fed, so piggyback is one of them. Not splitting, piggybacking.
Correct.
There are terms to it, John.
Yeah.
Seems like some of the limits were, I wouldn't say lifted, but they were changed. Instead of like, you know, the 10 to 25, it's now like under budgeted authority, for
Correct.
example.
Those are changes that we're proposing, that if it's, if it's been approved in the budget, that we're gonna go out and buy these widgets, that we don't have to come back and get,
If it's over 10,000 or something.
yeah.
And you'll see the template was from a different form of government. They had a city manager, and so they had different approval processes, the department, the city manager, the mayor, and then it went to the council. So, you know, we're not that form of government, so we struck those out and looked directly to the RCW to say, what is the restriction, and
So
that's
these
what
aren't
this is.
changes so much as customizing for us.
Correct.
It's falling in line with state RCW. One of the things we don't want
But you
is,
were looking for the red line version.
Yeah.
is we're in the midst of Tremont, contractors, I don't know, rolling through there with the scraper and they find a house-sized boulder and it's a $50,000 change order. Well, the boulder's gotta get moved. We can't stop the project for 2 weeks for, you know, the next council meeting. We've gotta be able to, you know, keep the ball moving, so. So if you don't, I can read this in detail. If you've got concerns, get a hold of myself or Brandy, be the two contact points. And the goal is we'll have this before you with the federal component at the April 11th meeting, I believe. That's when we'll be adopting this. You ready to move on to bricks and tiles? I think this one's, so we talked a little bit about this. Left that meeting, not completely convinced I had direction. So since then, we've been talking a little bit about decorative lights potentially downtown. We weren't sure how many bricks were left downtown. And so the first piece there is some background. We're currently selling those bricks, which we really haven't any sales, for $35 for the brick and $50 for a tile. My proposal would be we raise that price to $75 to a brick, for $100 for a tile. And if we sold all of the bricks and all the tiles that are remaining, we would generate $34,000 in revenue. And we would use our website to market this. We could potentially raise $22,000 to put towards decorative lighting downtown. So,
And it's if we sell all 421.
except we sold all 420.
Selling 80 at 50, so let's double the price.
But
They're gonna sell.
But the difference is, we haven't said all we were doing before is raising enough money to cover the engraving cost.
It's just a concept.
Yes, it's,
We haven't told anybody that they're for sale for a long time.
one, we haven't told anybody that
We're
we're selling, and
Yeah.
two, what it is we're selling them to do. And so, my proposal is, we're gonna, you know, market the sale of these bricks, because we wanna make our downtown prettier. Beck's scowling.
How did you come to 75 and 100?
Those are totally arbitrary. Just seemed like round numbers
Well, in Rotary, we were gonna be charging $100 for a brick,
for a brick.
so I think that's pretty standard. In fact, it's a little less. And what we were charging was like crazy cheap.
Well, all we were doing is selling enough bricks to try to cover the cost of the engraving company. We weren't making anything.
You gotta remember that price was established, what, 14 years ago?
Right.
17.
17 years ago, so.
How about we sell the bricks at the price you mentioned and engravings extra?
For letter.
Yeah.
Charge you by the letter.
I'll buy per letter.
So, I guess, am I all wet, or?
Yeah.
I like it.
But we have to sell all four
This is
21 at the same time.
specifically for improving the downtown, we're talking about. this
Lighting.
in
It's,
lights.
it's to go to the light. So I will,
Yeah,
go ahead.
to me, decision points we have to make is if we say it's going to this downtown lighting or seasonal decorations, and I would prefer that it just be, that allocation be for seasonal decorations, and then if it includes lighting, that's great, rather than specifically saying lighting.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever it may, the choice may be. But the issue truly is you may not sell all of the bricks. You may sell half of the bricks, or you may sell a third of the bricks. And so we don't want the money spent on choosing whatever foo-foo we're gonna do downtown until we know what that revenue is.
We wouldn't spend it ahead of time.
Yeah.
I think.
I like the idea. I think 75 and 100 is great.
John already said he'd buy 5.
I know, so we could, yeah.
I think it was 4, but I did commit.
It's 416
I
left.
only have 4 grandkids. That'll wear the fence on the key.
Nobody told you yet?
No.
Okay, so I think we've got an idea of what it is, so I'll bring this back one more time, I think, or we'll go forth and do good, which is, I mean, so the direction I got, are we comfortable with the price point?
Why bring it back? Go forth and do good.
Okay, and it will,
Make the changes that suggest and.
this for seasonal decorations, which could include light.
It could include lights, it could, whatever.
And I know one of the pieces that the merchants, it's gonna be in partnership with the Merchants Association.
And the chamber.
And the chamber, and they're wanting, number one, we know that if we attach this to our marquee, we'll be able to fundraiser to build a new marquee, because it'll pull the marquee down. So one of the sticking points is the Merchants Association was gonna talk to the building owner to make sure that this stuff can be attached to the buildings so that we don't pull the marquee down.
Well, at the
We'd
last
rather
meeting
pull
that you
buildings down.
missed, that changed.
Okay.
Okay, so we're back to working with polls again?
Oh,
Yes, and
okay.
so they will be contacting Mark, and we had 2 Public Works people there talking about the idea of going back to the poles and the brackets and what the poles can handle and how many lights there would be. So there's.
Before I start selling bricks and marketing this, we're gonna figure out
What it could use.
what,
But you still could use it, it doesn't have to be lighting. It could be to pay for wreaths. It could be to pay for something for the 4th of July, if you want to put something red, white, and blue across.
Even
I
if the
personally,
balloons all
That was
over.
one of my questions.
yeah, and lights, you have to remember,
Right.
only work from September or October through to like March, because it gets lighter and the lighting is not as effective. So, you know, they have a limited, so, but you may, I just would like to see it used for seasonal decoration, whatever that looks like. And if it turns out to be lighting, I'm good with that too.
At our next council meeting, I'll have an update on the partnership and what's being discussed. And actually, it's a combination with lighting that has some attachments to it. And what we're working on now is what will work in our downtown now. And in the future, how much money would we need to put aside to replace those support poles, et cetera.
Well, remember that we did a study, 2010, I think it was, remember the downtown for Puget Sound Energy into Light on the lighting study that basically put overhead lights, washed out approved overhead lights on the south side of the road and then pedestrian bollards on the north side of the road. It removed the marquee, because as we know, the poles that we have up there now used to be power poles, they've become light poles. The marquee is integrated into the poles and they're holding up the poles. The marquee's holding up the poles, but the poles are holding up the marquee. And when we did a survey in 2010, George went out and he was like a marine surveyor with his little
Yes.
ball peen hammer, and he found that most of those poles are rotten in 2 spots, one at the base and one where the marquee is keyed in. And when Rudy built his rings and things, when he removed his section of marquee, which is allowed if he replaced that, the one pole that was in front of his building wouldn't freestand when he moved the
I
marquee.
think the proper way of explaining it is the marquee is holding the pole up and the paint is holding the pole together.
Right. Yeah, it's a very interconnected system, so. That's,
Well done. That's a good way to put it.
at some point.
And George and Bill were at that meeting and they described all of this.
Yep. And at some point, I think we've kind of danced around the marquee issue, and I think at some point, really the marquee issue needs to be brought back to the full circle.
Sounds like we'd have a detachment point on the south side, because we'd have new street
You'd have
lights.
poles. And
It's-
that doesn't mean that you couldn't have, with that streetlight design, you couldn't have the poles on the south side, the bollards on the front side, and have strategically located like green poles, like when you go to 4th Street, Bremerton, and I have the kind of zigzag thing.
Been to Gig Harbor, they've got this pair of green painted, their colors of their streetlights are the same as ours, and before you turn the corner where the lumber store used to be, they've got where their public banner like we have, it's a pair of powder coated beams with a pulley system on them. I mean, there's no bucket truck involved.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
That's what it should be.
Oh, okay.
Should be something simple.
You
We don't
snap, walk up and you snap the next banner on it and run it up the
Is there
pole.
enough electricity?
That's what we're working on right now.
Because I know when we plug in the icicle lights, it's very, very tricky. And then who's paying for it?
Right, and
We
that's all part of our discussion, and these are LED, so there's less of a draw actually than those lights.
We're
And-
gonna calculate the cost of the.
Well, we determined that trying to calculate the cost is almost an impossible task.
Well,
But we're gonna,
You could look at bills up to a point, look at the increase, but when we had a very robust conversation, and it would be at best a swag.
Can I just, then I'll be quiet. When we hook up those icicle lights, you can put 3 strands to one of those outlets, and any more than that, they blow.
right.
So it's,
Those are
electricity down there might be.
LED lights were those?
No.
No, those are icicle
Incandescent.
lights that are, yeah.
You'd have to modify, remember when Myries burned down, we lost one of our city sources of power, and we had to light the marquee coming back from the charging station on Frederick. And so there is a meter base at Frederick near the charging station. Whether or not that meter base would need to be upsized for additional power or extended further at Bay Street, you'd have to figure out how to extend at Bay Street going on top of the marquee with conduit, or, you know what I'm saying? So power is going to be an important conversation, whereas if you did the street lighting plan, you could have your bases that had outlets in them.
Yeah, yeah.
Discussion for the retreat. I think we can park this for tonight. So
But
we
this
got about,
idea is great.
thank you.
Yeah.
Once in a while. We got about 45 minutes left here, and we are to our last item, which is a big one. It's Title 20 Conditional Use Permits, Variances, Site-Specific Rezones, Non-Conforming Uses, and SEPA.
I'll start out with the good
Can't
news,
get
and
enough of
that's, I only requested 30 minutes, and so there's a chance you'll get out of here early. As you'll remember, in January, we made a decision to extend the existing interim ordinances to give ourselves a little bit more time to go through the codes, present the Unified Development Code to the development community, have a robust public process. And so we are on schedule. We put on our calendar that we would start going through the chapters in March at the April meeting and in May, and then we'd bring the entire thing for a final discussion at the June work study. And so this is the first of those 4 meetings, and we're starting off with the chapters that we've had in front of us for the longest period of time and have been kicked around a little bit more at the Planning Commission as well as the Development Committee, and have been refined. I do want to thank Councilmember Ashby. She sent me a few questions about this ahead of time, and so I have replied to her questions, and I'll get one of them out of the way, which she was concerned about our submittal requirements and requiring digital and paper copies and having 7 copies of everything. And we agreed that it's probably better to, if the attorneys are okay with the language, we're going to try to find a way to make it digital and paper copies as described on the application form, so that as our needs change, we can adapt our forms to make sure that people aren't providing more copies than are needed, but that we're still not reprinting things at our own expense. And so that was one of your 2 questions. The other one had to do with the non-conforming use chapter, and I'll get to that when we get into that section. So I want to take these one by one and then just see what comments or questions council has. And we have started a comment log, and so any comments we receive in hearing or in writing, we're putting into a matrix, and we're providing a response to each of those to tell the public if and how that comment has been dealt with. In some cases, we'll say that per the attorney's recommendation, that no change is suggested, or we've tweaked this section and go to page such and such to find your answer. And so we have a very short list of comments at this time, but we expect it to grow in the coming months. And we're keeping a council matrix and a citizen matrix so that we can kind of keep track of your comments, and you guys can find where we've addressed your concerns, and hopefully that'll help you through the process. So starting out with variances, the variance chapter is all new. It's replacing the existing chapter in our code, which is very short. The existing chapter, there's a variance chapter that includes just the criteria for granting a variance, and then there's an administrative variance chapter that talks about when an administrative variance can be used, but doesn't get into any of the procedural aspects of how to go through the variance process. And so the chapter that we've prepared, in which we've discussed with the development committee and the planning commission, essentially it establishes 2 types of administrative variance and 1 type of quasi-judicial variance, which would go to the hearing examiner. And so the criteria for each of those, I think, is pretty clear in the code. We've clearly outlined what the submittal requirements are for anybody wishing to apply for that type of permit. And then we've also set effective dates so that if you get a variance, you actually have to go and build something under that variance, or it's going to expire. We don't want these things hanging out in perpetuity. And so that has established sort of a sunset on these. I don't think that there was a whole lot of concern with the development committee on this particular section. And I just want to point out that, I think there's a lot of misconceptions among the public on what a variance can do. Everybody thinks that if they don't fit the code, they just need to get a variance. And that's not necessarily the case. You can't get a variance to allow you to do a use that's not otherwise allowed in the zone. If you're in that situation, you need to apply for a rezone or a comprehensive plan amendment so that you can do the thing that you want to do. Variances really deal with quantitative standards. If you have a height issue or a setback issue where something beyond your own doing exists, such as topography, that you can get relief from the strict interpretation of the city's code, and that's what our chapter seeks to do. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Nick, I have one question, just so I understand the process. On page 3, you've got administrative variances type 1.
Yeah.
Front yard setback up to a 10% change to a front yard setback standard.
Yes.
You described that. What is the front yard setback currently?
It depends on which zone you're in, but if you had a 10-foot front yard setback, you can get an administrative variance that will allow you 1 foot of reduction. So if something gets built slightly off of where it's supposed to be, you can get administrative relief, but anything more than 10% difference requires a full hearing before the hearing examiner. In the type 1 process, I should explain, that's in the permit processing chapter that will be coming forward in May. It is written, it's online and available for review, but obviously we haven't had a discussion of that yet, but that's just the lowest level of administrative permit process.
Well, I understand. I'm just trying to equate percent to, you've got a foot setback, and it's 10%, it's like 1 foot. 15-foot setback is 1.5 feet. I just wanted to demonstrate I know how to calculate 10%.
Pretty good.
That's why you're on the finance committee.
That's it.
So I've got some comments, and none of them are really all that impacting or substantive in terms of changing what we're trying to do. And should I just try and get those to you?
Yeah, if you want to email them to Carrie and I, we will log them in the matrix and we'll go
Okay.
through them with the attorney if needed and figure out what changes, if any, are.
Okay.
But they're
The
not
one-
substantive, I mean, is there anything that we
Well,
would want to hear?
I'll just give you an example. In the purpose statement, point 100, I think one of the things that people, like you explained, don't recognize is these are typically dimensional, but they're not for densities. You cannot get a variance to density, so I think that needs to be called out in here. And so it's a comment like that I have. As well, I think there's some provisions in point 150 that probably could be moved over to point 110.
Okay.
And then just some other minor things, but in section point 200, that requires that the city will make a decision within 120 days. But sometimes I think there's at least in some jurisdictions, the director can make a determination that greater than 120 days is needed for that decision. It's not left up to the applicant to voluntarily accept that. And that could be where you have a complicated application or it's in multiple return cycles. So I think maybe it's worth considering that language as well. So those are probably the two bigger changes.
Yeah, and I will say on the deadline, there is in our permit processing section an explanation for the computation of time.
Right.
And so anywhere where there's a deadline like that, it does provide allowances for stopping and starting related to resubmittals of materials.
Right. And the comment that I made about the director or the jurisdiction being able to make that determination, I think comes out of RCW.
It does. Okay, moving on to the rezone chapter, I think this is one of the bigger changes that we have before us. Currently, our rezone chapter, which is 1625, if I'm not mistaken, talks about contract rezones, and I believe it still mentions concomitant agreements, which is, it's a pretty outdated chapter. Rezones vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and for instance, the county, because they adopt a zoning map and a comprehensive plan map, which are identical, you really have to go through a comprehensive plan amendment process to do almost any rezoning. Our comp plan is set up differently because we have, in our comprehensive plan, we will identify property as commercial, but then there are 4 different commercial zones that are available to that business professional 1, business professional 2, commercial, and then mixed use can all apply to land that is zoned that way. And so in those situations where somebody is seeking to change their zoning, where going from one zone to another is consistent with the existing comprehensive plan, that's where you can apply for a quasi-judicial rezone and go to the hearing examiner for a recommendation to the city council. The chapter that we've written, I think the most important thing about this is that on section 0301A, it says there is no presumption of validity favoring the action of rezoning, which means essentially that council has total discretion on whether to approve that or not without, it's very hard for somebody to appeal a decision not to grant a rezone. And so I think in terms of being a good tool for the city council, it allows you to have zoning where you have a lot of control, but when a specific proposal comes in, presumably somebody's going to talk about what they want to do on a site, and you have the potential to do development agreements in conjunction with rezones, and so it provides a little bit more flexibility than what we currently have in place. And so again, we created a procedure, we have application criteria, we talk about who the decision makers are throughout the process, and again, I don't think that this was a controversial chapter with the Development Regulations Committee. I think that they mostly were supportive of this because it was something that can help get things approved rather than hinders them. And other than that, I don't have any other comments on this one, I don't think. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take those.
I I just have one question. Throughout various paragraphs in this section, in this chapter, it references either site-specific or quasi-judicial, and I'm wondering if we could just choose one or the
Yeah,
other.
we need to make that consistent. I will scrub that. Then moving on to conditional use permits. This was another chapter where our existing code had criteria for granting a conditional use permit, but didn't have a whole lot in the way of procedure, what's required for a complete application. It didn't specify what type of site plan you needed to provide, how detailed your plans needed to be, and even, we have a lot of situations where somebody will apply for a conditional use permit, and they want to submit a concept plan, and they come to the hearing, and everybody sees what they're proposing, and then when they actually go to build, their construction plans don't really match what they presented in a public hearing, and so we really needed to figure out how to figure out what major adjustments and minor adjustments to an approved conditional use permit were. And so that's something that's new here, where we want people to largely follow what they told the public they were going to do when they get their approval, which is not currently something that's very specific in our code. And I would even argue that we don't really provide for any minor adjustments in our code as it is now. We may have in practice allowed certain things to happen, especially where drawings have not been to scale or the submittals don't have a whole lot of detail. But our objective is really to be transparent with the public, tell them what is proposed, and then have development follow closely to what is ultimately approved so that there's no bait and switch that occurs between conditional use permit hearing and building permit submittal and issuance. So I think all in all, this is an improvement in terms of being crystal clear to the public about what we expect of an applicant, and also being clear with the applicants on what our process is going to be for going through this process.
I've got just a couple questions. So in 010D, is there an instance where a CUP and an SCUP would be required?
010 ABC, which one are you on?
D?
D.
Where it says a shoreline conditional use permit may also be required?
Yes.
There are instances?
Yes, a shoreline conditional use permit and a land use conditional use permit are not the same permits. And so you can apply for them concurrently, but one of them has to do with the designations in the SMD, and one of them has to do with the zoning designations, which, for instance, West Bay Center, part of it is in the shoreline jurisdiction,
Okay.
part of it is not.
Right.
And so if you wanted to do a mixed-use building there,
You'd have to
mixed-use
get
buildings,
both.
yeah,
Right.
you've got to apply for both.
Okay. On 040C2, under major adjustments, the second line substantially, I think that's a word that's used by others and has been argued over what does substantial mean? How do I define what a substantial change is? And I know that's been a challenge for a lot of jurisdictions.
The minor one above it is, the adjustments can't be more than 10%. So would a major be anything greater than 10%?
Yeah, I would say it's anything that isn't a minor is one good way to differentiate it.
Perhaps it could be, what about change in hours of operation? Or, I mean, you look at all the conditions of approval on page 4, and some of those are not quantitative.
Typically, hours of operation, though, would be a hearing examiner condition if there was a concern
Right.
expressed. I think that would, and that isn't something that you can adjust when it's a condition. But both, I think all those are good points.
Under 060, we talked about approving, denying, approving with conditions. Is there also a remand opportunity? The hearing examiner, I think, could, in theory, remand back.
Yeah, is it remand or reconsideration?
It's a remand.
It's a remand.
Yeah.
I can certainly ask the question.
Remand to whom?
Well, back to staff, for example. And then that's really it. That's all that I have for that.
Were there any other think we went back and forth a lot on what needs to be submitted in terms of a site plan. I think there were some people who felt that they didn't want to provide a lot of detail, so that it would be a low-cost application. But I think that, you know, that's an issue where you're balancing the rights of the neighbors to have input on a project with the rights of the developer to, you know, easily develop their property, and you have to, I think providing the information is a more transparent way to go, but I think there was some resistance to that.
And I think the hearing examiner locks down approval to that site plan submitted, so everybody knows what's set in stone.
Right, the problem is that historically, the county has allowed quite a bit of latitude between what goes through a hearing process and ultimately what would get platted like in a residential. This is a, you know, conditional, when you look at preliminary, and there's a lot of local builders, developers that still have that historical perspective that they're not wanting to let go.
Yeah, across the county.
Yeah.
So moving on to the non-conforming uses and structures, and as we've already adopted a portion of the non-conforming use chapter earlier this year, this one has been somewhat more controversial in terms of our discussions. I think probably the biggest change from our current code to what is proposed here is that our current code allows people to enlarge a non-conforming use, which is really counterintuitive because the purpose of a non-conforming use chapter is to allow something to continue as it is, but not for it to get bigger. And if you want something to expand, it should be zoned for expansion, not for being non-conforming. And so that's one big change on section 040A. I did want to note that in 010, the first section, I did want to add a reference. Our sign code is going to have a specific section for non-conforming signs that is in addition to what's in this chapter. And I think there's also, it already references non-conforming shoreline uses, which are dealt with in the Shoreline Master Program. Other than that, I think there was, we've provided a process where people can now apply to have their property recognized as a non-conforming use. That was something we did not have previously. And so this actually gives somebody the opportunity to either be able to show when they go to sell their property that, hey, I have a determination from the city that this is legal. And that usually will give a bank the assurance to provide a loan or give the buyer some certainty that they'll be able to continue something that they're buying without having a whole lot of difficulty with the city. So I think that's a positive development. One of the things we did hear pushback for, and which is in underline, is that our current code said that you can't abandon a non-conforming use for more than 180 days or 18 months within a 3-year period. And so we have reintroduced that language to give you 18 out of 3 years.
Where is that?
It's on page 85, section C. It's in the blue.
It's in the blue
underline.
Oh,
Our page
no,
two.
I brought the earlier.
Oh, you brought the original.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah, so since your meeting in January, we did add that back in there because we talked about putting it in there, but I noticed it wasn't in there. And I also noticed on the following page, under section E, I think that also needs to have a 18 months and 3 years added to the timelines on that section, which I'll,
Which one?
top of page 86, E.
Page 3, that's mobile homes though. E up the top, never mind, I'm sorry. Different E.
The top E.
I think that makes sense, and an example that I heard some years ago was the 18th hole was up for sale to non-conforming use, and it was taking them greater than a year to sell it, so they were worried they were going to lose the ability to have that continue, and so they asked for more time, and that was granted.
So the permit that you can obtain, as I mentioned, is helpful when you're going to sell your property, but it's also helpful if you are looking to improve your property, like if you were going to remodel an existing building and there's some question of whether you're a legal use or not, you can get a permit to demonstrate that you're a legal use, and then you are eligible to do remodeling activity within the framework of this chapter. With our comprehensive plan deadline approaching, I think it's June 15th is when the applications are due. If there is concern among council or anyone for the status of an existing non-conforming use, they can always apply for a comprehensive plan amendment to start the process. And so I know we've given the example repeatedly of the auto body shop on Sydney as being residential in the comp plan, but being non-conforming. And so something like that, or there's the convenience store up just south of Tremont off of Sydney, I forget the
Forest Park.
yeah. So there's a little neighborhood grocery there, and those types of things, if you want them to be conforming rather than non-conforming, they should be designated as such in the comp plan. But we've never done any comprehensive inventory of what we suspect is non-conforming. But there's some obvious examples, and then I think there's a lot of less obvious examples. But you know, if you're talking to people who, or if you know of any of these things, you may want to mention it to owners that they can apply for this, and hopefully we can bring them into the.
We can do that as a body. I mean,
Yeah, you can initiate that, or they can initiate it as an applicant.
In our process, when do those need to be brought forward?
They need to be submitted before June 15th.
Okay, so I don't know, the ones that we know of and are obvious, I think we should, my personal opinion is we should do.
We initiate,
Well, we should
But,
initiate.
and they may not want that because there are potentially tax implications, because they have residential zoning and they're running a commercial business, their land value may be assessed at a lower rate, I don't know.
And it's also, I think, arguable that the prior council decided that the vision was that that area would change. And so that you would have these non-conforming uses or structures that would go at some point.
Yeah.
So I think we'd have to have a discussion about what the vision for those areas are before we went out and solicited change for those areas.
Well, I think there are certain circumstances where I think it's appropriate for us to take action. And you mentioned Forest Park is one. Forest Park has been a little community grocery store for 50 years.
it's on Melcher or something.
Yeah.
Parallel to Tremont.
It's not Melcher, it's the next street up though.
Begins with an R, or I don't know, it's not Rady, north of Rady, south of Rady.
So,
It's one street up, yeah.
in any event, if there's any other questions about this chapter, as I mentioned, some of this was already adopted in January, and the rest of it will get adopted as part of the uniform code.
South Street, Weston, Garrison.
Okay, moving on, the last chapter, which is probably the most intimidating based on size, but is actually the most simple, is the SEPA chapter. And this one, actually, we were on a fast track with this last year, and the Planning Commission has already had a hearing on this chapter and recommended its approval. But when we realized other things were shifting within our code, we wanted to wait and make sure that we just put it in the right place the first time. And so the Department of Ecology adopted new rules in 2012 and 2014. And because we had adopted so many sections by reference in our existing code, we needed to re-adopt those sections in order to adopt the changes that had been made. And so this chapter basically brings us into consistency with the SEPA rules that exist today as found in the WAC. And so I think this it's a little bit thicker than what is in our existing code, but I think that's just because we rely on state law without actually referencing it in some instances in the existing code. And I think the appeals process for SEPA has been made a bit more clear under this new chapter, but SEPA's been in place for a long time, and the rules continually get updated and streamlined a little bit, but I don't think there's been a whole lot of change to it. So, any questions on SEPA? So feel free to submit any thoughts or comments you have on these to us or any of the other chapters. We're happy to get to work on researching any questions you have, and we'll, anything you want us to log into the matrix, we're happy to provide that so that the public can see what your thoughts are and that your questions are being answered as well as theirs. And we'll be back in April with our next batch. And I should just mention to the public that our comment period, we have a 60-day comment period that's open right now for this, for the public to provide written comment to the Planning Commission. The hearing on it at the Planning Commission is April 4th, And so we'll be taking public testimony, but the comment period actually extends a few weeks beyond that, so there is still time after the public hearing for people to submit comments before the planning commission deliberates in May, at the May, I think it's May 3rd, first Tuesday in May, that they'll be hopefully making a recommendation on this, and then it'll be to the city council as soon as it's ready.
Questions or comments? Nick?
Good job.
It's been
A lot of work.
A lot of work. And there's still more to do, but we're getting there. And so I think we're having the hearing on the extension that's next Tuesday. There's a component of the continuation of our
The interim regulations.
Interim, thank you. It's getting late. And so we have the hearing on that, but as we've all seen, we've got an adoption schedule for when we're gonna finally be done with this section of the code. And we've got sign code and, other components still to do.
And on the sign code, I'll just mention that we're planning on having that posted for public review in the next week and a half, I think. And so, so we're gonna put that out and just give people plenty of time to review it. We can't get it to the planning commission until they finish the work that's before them, but we'll at least get the public, get it to the public.
And there was a separate ad hoc committee of citizens and businesses on the sign code. So that process already happened. They gave us recommendation. Sharon's even working on that one, so.
Good job, Sharon.
We're close
That's
on
the
that
best
one.
code to work on.
Yeah. So, like I say, we're gonna post it for public comment. It'll go to the planning commission, in the next couple months. And, maybe by this summer, we'll have a new sign code.
Sign of the times.
That's exciting. Okay. All right, have a good evening.
See you Friday.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
And then the comments matrix is
Okay,
as well.
see you Friday.
And then I can go ahead
It's
and
9, isn't it?
export
I think
comments.
it
Brandon, is it 9?